Now it's time to finish off our designs. So we're going to demonstrate it, how to do it within the embroidery hoop. I've tried to do it so that you didn't actually have to buy anything extra other than what you would have bought to do the project itself. There are other ways of displaying your work, which I will go into at the end, but I'm going to demonstrate in the hoop today. The felt is an optional extra just to make your piece look a bit nicer from the back, but again, because it's going to be flat against the wall, it isn't actually necessary to do this part of the finishing off, but we'll get into the felt a bit later on. First thing we're going to do is, I have already done it and I'm not able to do it on camera, which is actually to take the piece out of the hoop, iron it, and then put it back in again in the position that you want to do. The reason we're doing that is because as you've sewn and as you've created it, it may have taken you may have been able to do it in one day, it may have taken you a couple of days. The piece will have shifted probably slightly, and also your screw may not be in the exact right place. So when you're placing your piece in for its final time, so it will stay in here for the rest of its time that you want it to be in the hoop, you need to be careful the position of the screw, because this is where you will be hanging it from the wall or however you're going to be displaying it. So you need to make sure that is central with the design, otherwise it will not hang central. So I've done this, but I haven't actually finished stretching it. So as you can see, it's still quite bongy and it's not really very tight. It's not that nice tight drum that we had previously. So we're going to tighten up the screw a little bit more and do exactly as we did when we were embroidering. We're just going to stretch, tighten, stretch, tighten and stretch and tighten a bit more. So you can keep doing this, and because this is going to be our final resting place for this piece of embroidery, you want to take that little bit extra time on this step and really tighten. You may even want to get a screwdriver and actually tighten the screw in even more. So as all of the embroidery hoops has this screwdriver slot, and it will actually able to tighten them, but I'm usually able to do it with my fingers. And you just keep tightening and tightening until you have got that nice tight drum and the fabric doesn't give at all. So the next step we are going to do is, now we've got it all nice and tight, is we are now going to trim the excess. So only do this step once you are 100% happy with the positioning of your screw and your design within your hoop. Once you've cut this, you will be able to shift it slightly, but it will be more difficult because you've actually trimmed the excess of the fabric. So just, take some time, make sure that you're happy with it, even crumple all of the fabric underneath so you can see what it will look like without any of the extra fabric. Make sure you're 100% happy, and then we're going to trim approximately 1 inch away from the edge of the hoop. Now you can do this with your pinking shears if you like, or you can just do it with normal scissors. Either will do. I'm doing with these pinking shears just because as I'm working on it, I don't want it to fray as I'm working, as I'm demonstrating. So now we've got our final fabric cut off, we're going to flip it over, make sure our table at the top is clean, and we're now going to get our embroidery thread. So we want a large long piece for this, possibly slightly longer than you would have done when you were doing your embroidery, because we're going to do a gather stitch all the way around the edge of this. So probably about, that will do. So it's probably about another 20 centimetres longer than we were using previously. So again, we don't need this full thickness of this embroidery thread, but I think if we take 3 strands, and that should suffice for what we want to do. You're going to keep some strength, but you also want that thinness so that you've not got a lot of bulk in the back. So separate down into the 3 strands rather than the 6, as you can see. We've got 3 there. We'll hold it against the paler background. And again, I'm going to do another knot, as we did previously. Cut the excess off and thread our needle. Again, we can use the exact same needle. There's nothing special about using a different one for this. And again, half your tail end of your thread about halfway down. So what we're going to do is we're going to get about 1 centimetre to 1.5 centimetres away. So not right at the edge because we don't want to fray the fabric, but about 1 centimetre away from the hoop. We're going to want to go in to the with your needle, and then back through approximately 1 centimetre away from themselves. Now you can either do it that way, so you go in, bring your hand round, pull it round, and then back through and pull it like that. But doesn't have to be neat, but because we're going to be pulling it to gather it like this, you don't actually need to go in and out like that. What you can do is go in, pull through, and then pull that through instead. So you're not having to pull your hand backwards and forwards. So it's just a case of going all the way around the edge with this method. If you start to run out of thread as you go towards the end, because we are going to gather it, feel free to pull. So you can see what we're going to be doing in the end. So just keep going until you've got all the way back to your original knot. Now you do need to make sure your knot is secure, because as you pull, it will pop out if it's not secure, and then you have to go back through. You may have to do the entire section again. So it's just keeping your stitches relatively even so you get a nice gather, but you don't need to worry too much about how this is going to look, because we are going to cover it with the felt. And you just keep tightening as you go. So when you get to the end, the easiest option is to make sure that your thread is on the outside of your fabric. So as you pull gently, you are actually on the outside, and you can hold it in position. So what you want to do is try and make it as tight as possible. You may have to help things along the way, and just pull and make sure things are lying flat as possible. Just keep pulling, and you may want to hold. So it's a little bit tricky, this bit. So you hold the edge of the thread with one hand so that it doesn't loosen. And as you then create a little bit of a, catch some of the fabric with your needle. Oh, I'm bleeding, oops. And it's a hazard of the art, unfortunately. So you've got a little bit of a stitch on the outside, as you can see here, and you pull, keep pulling tight, and hold it again, and do another little one of those. It's very similar to how we'd finished off the back of the embroidery, and you create a loop. So you've created a loop as you've pulled through again, and put your needle through that and tie a knot. And because it's taking a lot of tension, we'll just do that a second time and create a second knot on the top. And there you go. So that's one way of finishing off. If you want to make it extra tight, the other option you can do is actually, in this position, you can actually, we'll do it with another piece of thread, because this piece of thread actually isn't long enough. So the other option to make it super tight on the back is to get another piece of thread, tie a knot again, and thread the needle, and it's to go across a couple of times. So this will just enable all of this to stay like this. This is this technique. So we're going to go up from underneath, and then we're going to go right across, and or go from underneath at that point, and then pull this tight. And then we're going to hold it there with one hand as we then go into another section, just slightly further along. Hold it again, pull again, hold it again with our other hand, thread with the other piece of needle, pull again. Make sure that you lengthen your thread if you've got a long tail, and all you got to do is make sure that as you're doing the new stitch, you're holding the tension with the other hand so that you don't lose that tension as you go around. And this way it just enables you to make sure that the fabric is completely flat on the back. So you just keep going. So now we've reached a point where I can't really get to the other side too easily. So I'm going to hold it there. So again, hold it with your hand. You go into the same hole and make sure you come out, and it's a little bit fiddly because you're trying to hold tension with the other hand, and you pull out the needle and that loop that you've just created, put your needle through that, still continue to hold it tight, and just tie a knot, and that way you know it's not going to loosen off. And again, trim off that excess, and then we just get another piece of thread and just carry on. And there we go, one striped fabric, and you can either leave it like that or we can go on to the felt. So as you can see, if that was on the wall you wouldn't be able to see any of the gathering on the back, but it does look a little bit messy, and I do like to make sure that even the backs at this point, while I don't mind this bit being messy, I want to make sure that this is nice and clean if ever it's coming off the wall, or you know, if you want to show people. So what we're going to do, I've cut a piece of felt that's basically the same size as your inner hoop, so the wooden bit that's actually inside, so it will be this circle rather than the outer circles, just so that you actually then can't see it at all from the front. So what we're going to do is we're going to pin that, we're going to place that down, and then we're going to get a bit more thread. Now this thread you could do with the white thread, so obviously we didn't use much of the white thread on the design, so you could use the white thread for this, but this part really does need to be black if you're using black felt, or basically you need to match the colours, just so that we can get a little bit away with some slightly unneat stitching if we happen to do this. But you know, we will obviously try our hardest to make it as neat as possible. So again, you need to be about 50 centimetres again this time, just because we're doing a bit more fiddly sewing than we were with the gather stitch. And we want to cut that down. Again, separate it out into 3, so we've got that strength but not necessarily the thickness. And place it to one side and tie a knot. And cut off the excess. And thread the needle. So to start with, if we go to the top where the screw is, just so we know where we've started, we want to go underneath the thread felt and do a stitch approximately 1/2 centimetre away from the edge. And then we want to go into the fabric on the hoop, onto the fabric we've been sewing, and then come out on the hoop at a slightly angle, slightly further away from our original stitch. So I don't know if we can see that, so we can see we've gone into the fabric underneath, and then we're coming out on the felt on top. And then we just pull that tight and hook the screw. That will happen a couple of times once you're on this end, and you just make that tight, and then basically just repeating that stitch all the way around the edge. So it's into the fabric underneath, and then up and out on the felt fabric. It's a little bit tricky next to the screw because the screw kind of gets in the way, as you can see. So it's gone into the felt, to the fabric, and then up out of the felt, and then we just pull that tight. So like I say, we just continue that all the way around, so it's into the fabric and then out. As I say, it's tricky around the screw. If you struggle to do this around the screw, the one other way you can do it is you go into the fabric and come straight out like this, and then up and out of the felt, because the screw doesn't go. So what the position the needle is going to be in is approximately here when we do it, but obviously the screw is in the way. So we then go up, and then it's the same technique. So, and we just continue that all the way around the edge. Now we've reached the end, the final stitch is we go into the fabric to finish this off, and then out as close as possible to the stitch that you've literally just done there. So you pull your needle out all the way, and again we'll make a loop with that stitch. Put your needle through that loop and pull tight, and you'll end up with a little tiny knot that you can barely see. Pull it tight and then trim off as close as you can, and there we have our final design complete with felted back, so it looks nice and flat on the back and you can't see any of our gathering. And there's our final embroidery all ready to be hung up.